Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a quick look on how to create a heroic ideal in our story, more specifically a masculine one. While there are female heroes, I want to focus more on the masculine side of things rather than the feminine side. I don't know if I'm ever going to do one on the feminine heroic ideal, but that's something I want to address later, if at all. We will be going over the bit of a difference between the two later in this video, but as I said, I want to focus on the masculine and how to create a masculine heroic ideal for our readers to connect to. What are heroic motivations? One of the things that we need to make sure that we're paying attention to is, are our motivations for our heroic characters making sense? Are they going through and becoming the person that we need them to be as what we want people to aspire to? Like with Superman, he embodies the heroic ideal of meekness, like I said in the last video. So, are we creating a situation where our main characters are able to embody the heroic ideal as we would like them to see? What are some motivations? Motivations could include self-sacrifice. They could include endurance during tough times. They could be including intelligence. They could include different things. But one of the things that we always have to keep in mind is that the heroic and the villainous are separated by one point: selfishness. Is our hero acting in a selfless way, or are they acting in a selfish way? That doesn't mean that if somebody acts in a selfish way that they are inherently evil, but the heroic is always going to be pushing themselves to become acting in a way that is selfless. The difference is, one would say, the difference between a hero and a villain is whether or not they would destroy the world to save their lover. For instance, the heroic person would take that self-sacrificing by allowing that person that they love to die, whereas the villain would be the person who would sacrifice the entire world for that person. That's something that we don't necessarily see in today's society because we place such a high value on romantic interest. The problem is that whatever they're doing, there's always going to be a cost. What is the cost? For the hero, it's going to be a self-focused cost, where the hero is taking on the burden, whereas with the villain, they are looking to shove off the cost of their decisions. Another thing that we can keep in mind is that how is it going to affect the world around them? We instinctively know that a hero has to walk alone. It is something that they have to do in their own way, in their own time. Whereas the villain will be trying to shuffle off their responsibilities, get rid of the responsibilities for their actions, blame other people. Whereas the heroic person will be trying to take the blame, as it were, for what happens. How do we show them achieving these heroic goals? It's not just the fact that they have to achieve these goals, but how they go about doing it. There's a phrase that I've heard, that everybody has heard at this point: the ends justify the means. Basically what that is saying is that it doesn't matter how you got to the end point, as long as the end point was reached. That it doesn't matter how many bodies it took to get to where you wanted to be. It only mattered the fact that you got there. The problem is that what we fail to realize, and what's failed to be understood by people who are using that phrase, is that that means is that there is no upper limit to what the cost could be. If saving the puppy cost billions of people's lives, that would be a situation where ends justifies the means. It doesn't matter how much that costs to get that goal, but the fact that the goal was achieved and they got the desired outcome. As heroes, there is a spectrum between that, the ends justifying the means, and what is the true value of what they're trying to achieve. For instance, if you have a hero that's trying to defend a population, typically you see this with stories where you have a protagonist brought from one world to another. They are trying to achieve a victory. What is the cost, and how do they achieve that victory? Are there ways that they can overcome the difficulties or are they going to have to sacrifice their loved ones to achieve it? Sacrifice is a part of the decision and cost analysis in our story. When we have a character that wants something, they have to be willing to sacrifice to get it. If something doesn't have a cost, it has no value. This is a quote from the book Starship Troopers that I want to do later on. But something that we have to have in our story is if we have our characters go through and blast through the enemy where there is no cost to them achieving their goal, it's going to rob that connection that you're going to have with your readers. It's going to rob them from an emotional catharsis because we need a buildup of tension in order to feel like we've actually achieved something worth achieving. In that same way, the character that we are following, the character that we're cheering for, our hero, they have to be sacrificing along the way. And this sacrifice doesn't necessarily have to be people or money or time. This could be just stress. They are taking on the responsibility of being the hero. This is not something that is necessarily seen as a empowering thing, but rather a responsibility thing. And to quote Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. Responsibility is what the hero has to take on. In the movie Spider-Man, particularly in the Tobey Maguire one, he is taking on that heroic journey. He is giving up that love that he wanted in Mary Jane, in that this is something that he wanted, but he recognizes because he is put in a position where he has to be the responsible one, where he has to save people, he has the duty to do so. So this is something that we can show how our hero is giving up those things to achieve the goals that they are looking to have. How to sidestep melodrama. Part of the concern is when we're telling our stories is that what can happen is that when we try to create these emotional connections with our hero and our reader, if we can go overboard. One of the things that you need to keep in mind is that while the character, a normal person, might feel unable to handle the stress and the responsibilities of being the hero, we have to dial that back. What a normal person would react is not the way that we want to necessarily show our heroes. And when we have our heroes act in a way that is melodramatic or overdramatic, where they are breaking down and crying every 5 seconds, that undoes the tension. That shows to our reader that our characters can actually do it. And when they achieve their goal, it is undercut by the fact that they spent their whole time whining and crying. We don't respect heroes because they are always complaining, but rather because they are shouldering the responsibility and they are shouldering the things that they need to do with as little complaining as possible. Now, this does not mean that we can't show our heroes struggling emotionally with what they're looking to do, but it should be always tempered to the point where our characters are not allowing those emotions to over affect how they are playing out in their story. For instance, if you have a character that's going through a really tough time, say a very close friend died, they should not be going around all the time crying and weeping. But one of the ways that you can show this and still not be having this as a melodramatic situation is that they are sequestering themselves off. Whether or not you actually show them in that negative emotional state, or you show the effects of them being in that emotional state, provided that it's set up properly, this is something that we can use in our stories to show how deeply a situation is affecting our hero, our main character. Balancing the wants and needs. This comes back to the idea of how is the person playing out what has to happen. The character has a need to do something, but how do they want to get it? How do they want to achieve that goal? Typically, people want to achieve the goal with as little cost to themselves and others as possible. But if they get what they want, then it's not going to be as entertaining or connecting to the reader as we want it. We need to see our heroes struggle, and overcome. If there is no struggling, if there's no overcoming for what they are looking to do, then that will undercut the story and undercut our ability to actually create emotional connections to our readers. So, when we're talking about balancing our wants and our needs for our characters, there has to be tension. There always has to be tension within our story between those two elements for our characters. We can't make it too easy for them, or else the story falls flat. We need tension, sort of like if you have a bundle of sticks together. There needs to be tension around those sticks to keep them upright. Just that same way. So we need to balance our wants and our needs for our heroes, how the hero should interact with others. As I mentioned earlier, they should be interacting in such a way that they are inspiring not only the characters within the story, but also our readers. They should be interacting in such a way where they can feel confident, or others can feel confident in that they are going to make the right decision, regardless of what's going on. Part of what makes a hero is that we can't see the suffering that goes on underneath. That is the same way that it should be for the characters within our stories. We should always remember that our main character is different than all the other characters, but only from our perspective, only from the reader's perspective are they actually different. Within the story world, our main character is not the main character of the story to our other readers. Every side character believes that they are the main character of their own story, and they are just trying to be a part of what's going on. For instance, if we have a situation like, say, the Wizard of Oz, for example, the Scarecrow thought he was the main character. The Lion thought he was the main character. The Tin Man thought he was the main character. These were all people who were acting and had agency in themselves so that they could do what they were looking to do. For the Tin Man, it was to get a heart. For the Lion, it was courage. For the Scarecrow, it was the brain. These are all things that these people needed to overcome. These are things that they needed to do for themselves. They didn't necessarily care about what was going on beyond their sphere of experience. Yes, they cared about Dorothy. Yes, they cared about what was going on. But their primary goals had more to do with what they were looking to get. And they were willing to make sacrifices of their want to achieve their overall desire of staying safe as a group. Now here we're talking about gender-specific heroic ideals. One of the things that is happening today is that we tend to blur the lines of what makes a good hero different from a gender perspective. Men cannot do the same thing women can do. We cannot create life in ourselves. Likewise, there are things that men are better at doing than women are. The upper limits of a man will always be higher in regards to strength than a woman. All you have to do is take a look at the weightlifting world records and you will see there is a vast difference between men and women when it comes to strength, because our bodies are designed to be strong, to endure a lot more physically, whereas women are not designed in that same way. Let me make this clear. This does not mean that one gender is lesser than the other. We are both puzzle pieces of the same board. We are both interconnected in the same way, and we rely on each other for the continuation of society. People are going to say that's not the case, that there are spectrums between men and women, and there are different ways that femininity and masculinity are presented in each individual person. This does not mean that they are interchangeable. I will fight that always, but they are not interchangeable. But that means is that we can play up each gender's heroic ideals. For men, it's going to come down to fighting. It's going to come down to protecting. Whereas for women, it's about self-sacrifice in more of an emotional way, loving way. Women are inherently more empathetic, which means they are able to deal a lot better with younger kids. That's just how we were designed. As a Christian, this is foundational to my beliefs. So keep that in mind. Hopefully one day I will do a video on more specific feminine heroic ideals, but that's not going to be today. So overall, these are things that are just we need to make sure that we're paying attention to when we create our heroes, that we are creating heroes that are self-sacrificing. We are creating heroes that are others focused, that are willing to jump on the grenade, as it were, so that others can survive, to make the sacrifice play. These are heroic elements. And it's just not the strength or the self-sacrifice, but also endurance, making sure that you are doing the right thing continually, not just when it's convenient. It is easy to give up when things are hard. A hero is somebody that keeps going when nobody else continues to go, because it is the right thing to do. All right, everybody, that's all I had for today. As always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave them in the comments below. Until next time, bye.
I am a poor, wayfaring stranger. I'm traveling through this world of woe, yet there's no sickness, toil, nor danger in that bright land to which I go.